Okay, so the first thing we want to do is just do the approval of the last July 2nd minutes. So if someone would make a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. All right. All right, so we have a bunch of things in the agenda items that kind of involve discussion and approval. So I thought we'd start with those and see if we can batch everything. The very first thing we want to talk about is the vendor proposals for the condition assessment of the headstones in the oldest section. We sent out 4 requests for proposals, got 2 responses, and I'm going to ask Chris to fill us in on this.
I don't have them in front of me. Did you print them out, Michael?
Yeah, I did, but I realized I could throw them right up on the screen for.
Okay, perfect.
Great.
So I'm gonna,
So yeah, we reached out to four vendors who are qualified and versed in assessment and you know, conservation efforts for historic cemeteries and markers and memorials. And two of the vendors replied back, and we had quite a spread in the numbers of the 2 that we got. We had we have one proposal for 23,200, and the second proposal, I believe, was 43,000 even.
43.5.
43.5. So all of the companies that we solicited the bids from have a lot of experience in the field, came highly recommended. We reached out to the vendors based on the knowledge that we had gained on their expertise. And so we're comfortable with the qualifications of any of the 42.5, excuse me. We're comfortable with the capabilities of both the companies that submitted their proposals within the scope that we had provided. So here's where we stand.
And
I think there's factors maybe that play into the reason for having such a wide spread. A lot of it could quite well be associated with travel time and lodging, based on where the vendors are, you know, coming from. So that could explain quite a bit of that spread.
And I should remind everyone that we got $20,000 for this project at the last town meeting. So that's our limit.
Well, okay.
Well,
So have you been able to check, Mike, have you been able to check to
we
see?
do have money in surveys from an ATM previously for the cemetery,
Oh,
which does have money, so we could meet the full 23
okay.
to get the entire project done.
So I propose that we actually go ahead with the vendor that came in at 23. And what we'd like to do is get approval from the commission to have Chris and Mike take the next steps. And Mike, can you explain what the next step is?
Yeah, so a couple of things. This wasn't a full RFP, but we were able to choose 4 companies that we already examined, looked at. We worked with Karen to look at the qualifications and made sure they were all pre-approved. I know one, Peter, you recommended us look at, so we looked at them. They definitely had the qualifications. So we had to solicit from at least 3, and then we need at least 2 bids to come in. 2 quotes to come in because it's a quote, not a bid. If it was a bid, you just put it out there, and whether it's 1, 5, 10, it doesn't matter. In this case, we solicited. So the 2 that came in. So the next step would be entering the contract. We did have a sample of our contract in there with the proposal, so everybody was aware of. We had the scope of work, we had all of it in there, so they all understand what they're going to be committing to. I know all of them mentioned that some of our insurance requirements are high, but we responded to them and said, those are our insurance requirements in general, but sometimes we waive individual pieces. Like, you know, I try to say to people, if they're moving stuff, we're not gonna do anything with the automobile coverage. But if they're doing consulting in the cemetery and no use of vehicles, then we would be able to come with a lower limit. They're still gonna be driving their car or whatever, so they'd still have something. And we check this with the lawyers to make sure they sign off on form that it is fine. And obviously for, you know, when we get into like the actual restoration work, we'll require every bit of it. So, but me and Chris, the next step would be if authorized to to award, we would then meet with get the vendor in, let them know that they're qualified, that they've been approved by the cemetery commission, and that we want to lock up that contract and get them going, because we are proposing that they have everything back to us for March to submit to the select board in order to go to the next annual town meeting for the funding to actually do the restoration work. So at this point, this is strictly just an assessment and just evaluating the condition and giving us a plan to move forward with. So, like I said, me and Chris would enter into it, and then go from there. So is there any questions?
Yeah, any questions or discussion?
Well, I mean, this is the old section of the town cemetery and the Curtisville
Yes.
section?
Yes,
Okay. And that's it?
that's it, yes, that's all.
Extent,
It's
okay.
probably about 630, 640 stones
Yes,
total.
the old section is plus or minus 600 stones, and there's 35 stones in the Curtisville section. In the Curtisville section, just a little background on that, was churchyard cemetery at the Curtisville or Interlaken Congregational Church, and the graves were removed and reinterred in the town cemetery some decades ago. Those burials date back to the 1830s and 1840s.
I think it's about, yeah.
Yeah,
that's
that whole cemetery was moved and reinterred within the town cemetery.
So any other questions or concerns?
Yeah, just a few. One, can we, when you meet with them, can we give them a minimum spec to the digital photographs? You know, if they attach them into the spreadsheet row, they'll be tiny and unusable for other purposes. So it might be nice if we had, you know, a set of files that went with the photos that, you know, were their original.
Can you,
I can help you with that.
yeah, if you want to get us that, we can definitely bring that up.
And it might also be nice to create sort of a database of, once again, not hard, and we can do it internally. I can help with that too, but rather than just sort of a spreadsheet, which is a file that then it gets sent around and there's 12 versions of it. It might be nice if we, for every record, we had a place where we could post it, and a database included the record, all this information plus the image.
And that could be something we take on, but that wasn't something
Yeah.
we obviously did not put that into the specs. It's more of them digital photos, creating the spreadsheet, identifying which ones need to be restored, which ones can just be maintained, which one, you know, condition and the rest. So, yeah.
Okay.
So that's the next step, is just for us to contract and get this moving so that we can get the price, we can get to the next step, which is actual, what it would cost to restore the cemetery.
And you guys are convinced that there's not a substantive difference between the 42.5 vendor and the 23.5 vendor in terms of like scope of work that we need?
No, the scope of work it was made clear to all four of the vendors that we solicited from. I'm pretty sure that a bulk of that difference really does come in travel and lodging, unfortunately, because these companies aren't necessarily right next door for the most part.
Right.
So where are they located?
So this one outfit is based out of New Hampshire. And then we have the lower bidder, who's as close as Ghent, New York.
Okay.
So not
I think
far
it's
off.
close
Not far
by.
off.
Yeah.
Impacted, right?
Yeah.
Community.
And they did ask questions, and we responded to all four vendors with answers to all the questions that came up during the process. So everyone was allowed to see what questions were asked and clarification in case anybody wasn't sure about the scope. And that, so as far as we're concerned, all procurement, because it wasn't a bid, all procurement laws were followed as far as getting this out, getting the responses. And really at this point, we have two options. One is to award the bid or reject all of them and start again if we felt as though there was a reason to. And looking at them, we don't see any reason. Both are qualified firms with substantial background and can do the work.
And we're eager to get this going, because there's the time is of
Of the essence.
Yeah, exactly.
Because again, this is only the first phase of the restoration.
Right.
Then comes the actual implementing of recommendations, which is a whole nother.
That'd be a different bidding process and,
Oh, yeah.
and we may end up with a different vendor at that point as well. But this just gets us started, so
I
it's,
make a motion, we authorize Michael and the team to pursue the low bid, low quotation, in terms of bringing it to contract.
Yeah, we need a vote to approve the low bidder. And then authorize me and Chris to enter into.
I make a motion that we approve the low bidder.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And then you're, go ahead and do
And
yours.
then
Authorize.
authorize you guys to make create a contract, yes,
All right. Second,
negotiate a contract.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, wonderful.
Something like that.
Great. Very good. So the next thing I want to talk about, that we need to talk about is the management and removal of overgrown plant material in the cemetery. And this has several different iterations, but we do have a bylaw, which I don't have right in front of me. But it says that we have the right to remove plant material that is interfering. And we have plant material that's obviously been there for 70 years. It's overgrowing tombstones. Chris has identified 7 specific locations. And he has some
Somewhere's thereabouts.
horrifying photographs. That you can take a
So
look
we can
at.
just, there's photos on the second page, photos of the actual shrubs, and then I
Campbell?
attached the plot
Oh,
cards.
my.
Yeah.
That's the first one. Oh, geez. Some of these I can't even think of off the top of my head. Yep. Yeah. Take a look.
Or Norman Rockwell in there.
Oh, I think that's lovely. It sort of looks like something you see in the lake, some algae bloom.
Yeah, so this set of photographs really only identifies individual lots within the main cemetery sections. It does not address the perimeter hedge around Church Street and Main Street. And it also does not address sections, for the most part, section 3, section 8, section 7, where there's bordering family plots, Norman Rockwell being one of them.
Yeah.
That have hedge corrals, for lack of a better term, around them. That does not address those. These are individual
Yeah. We want to
spots
start,
within the open sections.
we want to start with these.
Sort of
Question.
low hanging fruit that does add quite a bit of maintenance to,
Are you gonna cut them back or remove them?
well, that's what we're discussing here. I think
Yeah.
removal is where we're ultimately headed.
Good.
We've done cutbacks in the past over the years, and with lack of manpower, lack of time, it's hard to keep up on that. Furthermore, the roots, undermine, they cause damage to the foundations and, long-term integrity of the monuments. These were all obviously, day one, well-intentioned, maintained hedges. Families were around and probably came around and took care of them for several years. But then families move on and it sort of gets left to the wayside, and the town picks up on that.
What section of the bylaw is?
I think I saw this up a little bit higher, under, some, a little, come back, come back.
Sorry, went a little too fast.
That's right. All monuments, markers, and permanent plantings shall be subject to, right, that's it, 1.6.
I think most of what we've seen is beyond pruning back and training at this point. If we do any pruning, it's gonna look worse than,
Correct,
I
yeah.
mean, they're just,
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is not required, shrubs are not allowed. I mean,
Right.
basically.
Right.
And they never had been, but, like with many of these
You notice all
rules
these,
that are written into our books, people stray a little bit and we get lax on their enforcement, and it's hard to backpedal. But they never were really allowed, the town, for years, just kind of turned a blind eye to these things and, what's the harm in it? But here we are, things get out of hand and for maintenance purposes and the overall aesthetics of the cemetery, I think it's time that we start addressing some of these.
So Hugh and Chris would like to remove them, and the question, well, the commission needs to approve that, but also what kind of notice do we have to give or should we give about this? And I think that's more of a quasi-legal town management.
Well, I mean, obviously, they're not allowed, but we want to be sensitive to pulling them out. So whether or not this is like an early spring project and we get notification to those, however we can get notification to them. I know, Chris, you're concerned that some, whether we can reach families or not, if they moved out of the area, but, you know, these shrubs and trees, you know, if we were to say that we're gonna start after Memorial Day removing, or even before that, maybe after winter when we come out before Memorial Day, gives people an option to go out there and actually, if they wish to do something themselves. You know, I talked to Chris about it, you know, some places will let you put in like planters where the plants are in a planter. You can get stone ones to put beside or permission to do that, but that would be decorations that would be approved. But right now you know, the issue is that we shouldn't have allowed them to get this far. And now after years of growth and those allowed to stay, we'd be taking them out. So yeah, Chris and Hugh would like the cemetery commission's backing that they would be removing it. What do you think, Chris, if we were to say early spring, that we now spend the next month or so trying to look up contact information, contacting those families and letting them know that we're going to be removing
A number of these,
hedges, plantings.
a number of these are easy, you know, and then a number of them are just, we know that there aren't going to be any, you know, contacts where, if you could look at the burial cards and, you know, here's one, the last burial in the plot was 1983.
I think
You're gonna go back, you're gonna find that some of these haven't had an active burial in decades.
Oh, those names we recognize.
Does early spring work for you? in terms of-
Yeah, that's fine with me. I mean, as long as it's not too wet, you know, it dries in there pretty quick. The main thing would be keeping a record. Maybe we'll get some good photos and then 5, 6 years down the line, some family member comes, they don't think that we were just disrespectfully ripping things out. You know, a lot of thought went into this, you know, it's not, you know, a lot of heads came together to.
Is there any way, assuming that we get a hold of some of these people relatively quickly, is there any way we could do some of this work this fall?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, and I would make sure that when we notify people in this letter, it's over and above the fact that we're referring to a bylaw. I think the explanation that these are so overgrown that the roots are going to, you know, impact the integrity of that grave, of the, you know, the markers.
Me and Chris could probably draft a letter with Karen.
Yeah,
If
yeah,
you
give them the
guys-
rationale that it's over and above, just, we're just trying to be, you know, on top of this, but.
So in anticipation of possible issues, if somebody wants to maintain them, would we then have them appeal to this commission and basically say that if, you know, because I don't want us getting, you know, do we want to create an appeal process or something? Say somebody goes, well, that was so-and-so, we planted the tree in their memory. Something like that, then we would say, well, you're going to have to come before the cemetery commission in order to get approval for that planting to remain. Or do you want us to just, how do we want to handle that? Because it could come up. And I just think it's advisable to be proactive here, to come up with a plan to address if somebody.
Well, I think rather than allowing it to remain, maybe they can come and appeal or come and discuss with the cemetery commission what their other options might be. And there might be totally acceptable other options. But I think looking at all these, they're so overgrown and they're so old, they've been there for so long that those root systems are problematic.
I think, I'm sorry, I think the thing that stresses that they're actually gone beyond, they're actually covering the, you know, the recognizable, respectful resting place of somebody, the identifying marker, you know, most, you can't even see who's there, you know, so.
Here's a great example of that.
Yeah, I mean, and its intent wasn't that, I'm sure, you know what I mean?
No.
I plant hedges by my front door and I had to cut them down because they're, you know, it's, you know, so I think that's probably the same thing. Time goes on and things get away from us, so.
We can have a thing at the bottom. If there's any questions or concerns, please contact. We'll point one of us to contact. And then if somebody is really bothered by the fact that we're doing this, we'll ask them to come before this commission and discuss. If the other ones are like, oh no, those are overgrown, take them out, then right, we'll just start the takeout process. And if we don't hear from people, we'll hold to a certain date
Yeah. Right,
if we don't hear back before we take action.
okay. And do we have anywhere a list of what is an acceptable planting in a planter, et cetera, et cetera?
I don't think so.
We do not, and I think that is something
I
we
think
should
that's something
down
we
the
should
road.
discuss and define it.
Yeah.
So that when we give people options, we know what those options are.
Yeah, I agree.
I kind of disagree with the questions or concerns strategy. I think the bylaw is clear. You can't plant shrubs or trees, and people have, and it's not our fault. I think if you want to give people an option, it should be to remove the shrub or tree and move it to the yard. They want to maintain that. It's not that hard to, if you're going to backhoe it out, to do, try to grab the root ball without guareeing and, make that available if somebody complains. But yeah, I don't think we should be inviting a negotiation.
Well, I'm not suggesting a negotiation here, that they have to go. But you still want to be able to be sensitive to the fact that they might want a planting there. Therefore, what kinds of plantings are
I'm
allowed?
talking about, about the fact that these 7 shrubs need to go.
Well, and I would make the argument that we're a little at fault here because we haven't been enforcing the actual rule. If we were taking plantings and removing them when they were young and making sure that they didn't grow. But obviously now these are things that have grown in so long that they should have been dealt with in a timely manner, and we
Then the only thing I would
failed
suggest
to do
is
that.
this is part of a larger effort to repair the headstones, improve the look of the cemetery, all the things that we're doing, including this, because this together is going to basically bring it back to its prime or whatever, I think that maybe we make that point.
I would guess that most people are going to completely agree when they see the photographs.
It's been,
I just think we might have 1 or 2 people that for whatever sentimental reason, and they're gonna wanna know what their options are. And that's where I say it comes back to this committee. I hope we don't have any, but we could have some,
I think we should be prepared
be
then.
prepared,
Yeah.
yes.
All right. So, then, someone make a motion to approve having Chris and Hugh and I and Mark and Mike sort of just go ahead and proceed with contacting these people and removing these overgrown plant material? Yes?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Wonderful, wonderful. So as part of that, Chris has suggested that we set up a twice-a-year removal of the temporary pots and other items that are often left on the monuments. He's suggesting April and November, and a lot of cemeteries do this. It's very reasonable. Assuming we all agree with that, do we need public notice? And if so, where and how? That's the big question I have.
when do people, one of the things we allow is seasonal holiday, stuff. Is April too late after the holidays? I'm just wondering, should it be February?
It could be, we don't generally open up the cemeteries, in the wintertime. Things get frozen into the ground.
Oh, I see.
March, maybe you start to thaw out, but really April is probably when the guys get in there and start doing the spring cleanup. And this is something that could be done systematically as the cemetery's cleaned up. Plus, that allows the families a little bit nicer weather because, to make them come back by February, again, in the snow and the ice and the frozen ground, to remove that may be, pushing it a little bit. So I think it's fair to give people some nice spring weather to come and get the stuff. And then again, when the spring cleanup is done, then we remove them.
But the other thing is that, my dad would always go to my grandparents' graves, my mom and dad's parents' graves, and put stuff out on Memorial Day.
Sure.
And there would always be temporary stuff in a pot. That I think we're referring to here is that you really want that stuff going until November, because a lot of it,
Yeah, and again, a lot of people do return and take care of their own things, but a lot of people visit, from out of town. They visit once a year
Right.
and it gets left and they don't return until next spring and it
Right.
could stay there. I'll give you an example. July 1st, when I resumed my duties in the cemetery, I went through and probably had half of the back of my pickup truck loaded with Christmas wreaths and trees and literally Christmas decorations, which were still in the cemetery in July. So people visit for one reason or another on holidays, but then didn't even return for Memorial Day this year. And, you know, that's the type of thing that we get.
How many were from Christmases gone past?
So that's true. That's true.
One last question, why have a specific month that you're allowed to do it? Why not just do it when you feel it needs it done?
Well, and that's really the way the bylaw's written.
The bylaw is written that way, but I've seen this in other communities that what you do is you say, we are having a cleanup day on this day, and everything will be removed, which gives people the option of setting up stuff, taking it down, and then somebody coming in and saying, what happened? You know, especially you have some very sensitive one with children where people leave toys and other things on them. It's just a way of saying you could actually have at the entrance of the cemetery, little ones that say decorations will be removed on this date and this date. And then people are aware that any loose decoration will be removed. We obviously reserve the right if it's damaged, if it's blown off or whatever, that we can just do it. But, you know, it's just a way of, I guess, communicating, because the concern that came up is that, Chris brought it up, is that stuff has been just left there sometimes for years. And since we really don't have anything, do we want to, it's just one way of formalizing it. We could just go in and but then you might be pulling something right off of somebody, they just put it up. At least if they know when it's going to happen, you're aware of it and you work around those dates. We'd want to do it before Memorial Day because we want people to obviously put up things for Memorial Day, and then we'd want it, you know, the holidays, so it goes up. And like Chris said, the cemetery gets buried in snow, everything else. But then when you come out of winter, you want to have that cleanup. So you just pick it twice a year where you're just going to go through, and we're not going to say choosing anything. We're going to just go through and remove all decorations on these
I think
days.
having it coincide with spring and fall cleanups makes
Yeah, it does.
functionally.
Yeah.
And how do we recognize something that was just put there prior, you know what I mean? I mean, that would have to be something that was, you know,
Can't
you know,
keep track of it.
who's to say when they can put it there versus, well, you gotta get it out here, but, you know.
So I think we do need to get this out to the public. What's the most effective way? We can certainly put it on the website, right? As part of the cemetery regulations.
Could do a press release.
Okay.
Yep, twice a year we're doing, but we do need to set the dates.
Yes.
and that. We could put up, like I said, some very proper dedicated signage that would look appropriate to the cemetery on the main entranceways that, you know, decorations will be moved on the following
Often
day.
cemeteries have their whole regulations printed on a large sign and posted somewhere at the maintenance shop or whatever. I don't know in this day and age if that's necessary. We may be able to have a simple sign that says, please refer to the town website. You know, refer them to the bylaws instead of having this poster a sign. Maybe we could.
Do we have a cemetery Facebook? I don't know, I'm just throwing that out there. Is that something to do? I mean, because you can keep you up to date with tours and things coming and,
Good
you know, that, I
idea.
mean, that's,
Yeah.
everybody I know is on Facebook, so,
Yeah.
you know, that might be an easy way to.
But back to setting the dates, we should set the dates. I'm going to defer to you on.
Yeah, I think with the coincide with the spring and fall cleanups, whenever they happen, I don't know if we want it November 1st and April.
When was the,
April 15th, I don't know what's appropriate.
when was the big meeting last year? It was right about Thanksgiving, wasn't it? Right before, so the week before.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if we get in there beginning of November, we can clean up, everything's kind of down and,
I think you want to be before Veterans Day.
yeah.
A
So
lot of people do put up stuff for
Yeah.
Veterans Day and then the holidays and then Memorial Day. And then obviously people put up around their own calendar, but as far as when we see stuff, it's Veterans Memorial Day.
Veterans Day is in November 11th.
Right.
Yes.
So November 1st, I think is good. And what about April 15th? Is April 30th too late?
Tax day.
A lot of things have to happen.
Fantastic. People would remember it.
What do you think, Chris? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Hugh, it's, what do you know?
Yeah, right there, beginning of April somewhere.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was thinking April 1st might be a little too soon, given the
Yeah.
weather. I mean, if it isn't, that's fine with me. I just,
Yeah.
Say, oh, you want a specific date, right? Okay.
Yeah, we do need to.
Yeah, because he's gonna go, if it falls on a weekend, it'll go in like Monday right at, but it'll be right around that date.
Yes.
So that people know it's gonna happen.
And that's the thing, I mean, it doesn't have, you know,
Right.
say April 15th and you do it on the 16th, or you can do it on the 13th, I don't think it's a.
I think you guys should just be empowered to pick a date.
Well, we
Pick
just
two
did.
dates a year.
November 1st and April 15th. All right?
What do we plan on doing with this stuff? Are we gonna house anything that's nice, or we just, everything's going out of fairness, or, you know, do you
I
wanna?
think out of fairness, typically you just go, because that's the notification part. If people want to come before the dates that we've set for the cleanup, that's when they should come and get anything they want out of there. If not, we shouldn't be picking and choosing. Something might look nice, but this other thing might have a ton more sentimental value for whatever reason. We don't, I hate to say it, I don't think we should be getting, this is my opinion, we
Nice
should be
spots.
choosing.
Nice spots to go to the swap shop. I mean, I do think, you know, we should recycle them if it's possible,
Yeah.
you know?
I like that idea, if we could possibly
I mean,
reuse.
to agree that we get that off the
I
ground.
would, just playing devil's advocate here, do you really want to see something that was left for?
Dear
I think
mom.
we bag it up, we throw it away, and it's just disposed of, but that's just a thought. I would hate to see something,
And we're not talking,
and maybe I'm wrong.
we're not talking a huge volume here. This is,
No.
this is because we haven't managed it as well as we should have. It's accumulated, you know what I mean? But I think if we get on the schedule, it's really not that big of a problem.
But this
People,
doesn't
for the most part,
apply,
are
this
respectful.
doesn't apply to like things that are like permanent
Statues.
planters. Like we've got some that are
Right.
antique concrete planters, those just stay.
We need to use a little bit of the, you know, the spirit of the law, I think, in enforcing this one. I think the guys are, you know, can do that. I think we just.
Yeah, plastic
use
pots are one
discretion.
thing, but
Yes,
Plastic
and-
pots, anything that's,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
toys, stuff, you don't know, you get left all types of stuff, and you don't know why.
Are you taking any questions from the public here, or is this just a board discussion at this point?
Just a board discussion at this point. But I will be lenient here. What is your question?
This is Kate Fletcher, and I'm coming in late here, so perhaps I missed something. But it sounds to me like you're setting dates within which people can't have planters by headstones. I've noticed
No,
that.
no,
No,
That's not,
no, that's not what we're talking about.
Okay, all right. Okay, sorry.
what we're discussing is twice a year that our highway department and cemetery commissioner would go through and clean out any decorations left in the cemetery. And that way people are aware of, these are the dates that things would be removed so that the cemetery doesn't build up excess items within it.
Okay, so like a metal planter would not be removed.
We'd be removing reefs, things, anything non-permanent would be, which is right in our bylaws to begin with.
But would a metal planter would that be removed?
Well, I can chime in. I would think that anything that can be, I mean, who's to say a terracotta or a metal or, you know, decomposing planter has any value more than any other. So I think to keep it even keel, it should be recognized that, you know, I guess we got to recognize what is a planter. Is it something that we can pick up and just move and car to car and, you know, so I guess that's something we got to recognize and, you know, then you're gonna end up with a bunch of metal planters that are rotting into the ground and creating sharper, more hazards. So I guess we're hopeful this thing becomes self-policed. Can I say that?
Yeah.
But people just come in respectfully, have things and move them out so, you know, they can refresh and we can, you know.
Right. Well, Kate, I mean, we're setting dates and with notification to the public. So therefore, if you had something like a metal planter that meant something to you or anything of great sentimental value that was left on a grave, you'd know that, you know, before these dates, you'd have to go in and just temporarily remove it. And then you could always bring it back with a new plant.
I guess I just would, my suggestion would be to be very clear about, and again, you know, I'm coming in late here, so I don't know why things would need to be removed. But I guess I would just be very clear and specific about what will need to be removed. I mean, in my specific case, I bought a metal planter. It was about $40. That's not a great expense, but we like it. And we took some time picking it out. And, in the spring, early summer, we put flowers in it. And then over the winter time, we put evergreen decorations in it. So, we tend to my father's grave all year round. In the wintertime, sometimes, of course, you can't get in, but still, the idea for us is that there's always something there. So for me, I would just want to be very clear on what would need to be removed, and, would be helpful to know, do I need to worry about this now?
Well, can we define what constitutes a permanent planter, say? Which you could define it, and you could include metal, and you could include the concrete, you could include terracotta, with the proviso that if it becomes damaged or deteriorated, that at that point, it would probably be removed. But as long as something is in good condition and considered a permanent planter, then it could stay.
Yep, I think that's what you need to do, Roxanne. You need to just be very specific and very clear. We see this with bylaws all the time. When you're not specific and clear, then that's when you run into problems.
I'm gonna disagree.
Yeah, me too.
That the difficulty of trying to assume every question that may be asked on every possible decoration that could be put in a cemetery, we can't get into.
I'm not talking about every
No,
decoration.
I know.
I'm just talking about planters.
So if we're just gonna focus on planners, that's fine, but I just don't want us trying to get too specific on this. It really is, they need to be permanent. We need to define what those few permanent things
Right.
are, but the rest of them are considered decorations. And we just
Right.
can't get into specifics. It's gonna have to stay slightly vague as far as that, because we want to be able to maintain and not let things just remain there if it shouldn't.
Right, but that's my suggestion, is to actually define what is considered permanent. Once we do that,
So maybe maybe before we put this into place, we should have one more meeting and we should
Absolutely.
look
Yeah.
at defining how we're gonna define those permanent items that are being placed in the cemetery, what's gonna be allowed, bring a recommendation, begin the discussion on it. And then everything else will fall to decoration,
Right.
which then will be removed twice a year. Unless damage or otherwise, where we would
Right.
take it out sooner if necessary.
It just seems so frustrating that every time you try to make improvements, we have to be very careful on how we define things, I think like some cases like this, we hope that common sense will trump anything, if somebody's got a planter and they're moving around or maintaining it, obviously those are things that hopefully we can recognize, and, that's what we'd like to see, maybe we even encourage that. But somebody brings something in and just lets it sit there and deteriorate. Well, whether it has sentimental value or not, we have to follow.
And that's where we're gonna have to be
Some kind
careful.
of
With planners, they have to be maintained.
Right,
So people just can't put a real nice thing in and just leave it and it's just,
right, well, that's got sentimental value. It was my grandfather's, I set it there and it's rotting away, but, so.
right,
I guess I said
Right.
enough about that, but.
yeah, but I think that's part of it, is that you not only define it, but you also stipulate that if it is in poor repair, it needs to be maintained.
Okay, all right, so, but we do agree that we're gonna have the twice a year removal, have the dates,
What was the date on April was,
April 15th
all right,
and November 1st.
and November 1st.
So if we're gonna go with this November, then we need to get that idea of what the permanent
Yeah.
things are and how we're gonna define it,
Yeah, I will have a
Within-
meeting before then.
this, and then go from there.
Okay.
So,
All right,
and right now, we're just focused on planners as far as what will constitute a planner.
okay.
That's allowed to maybe stay within the cemetery.
I mean, I think if it's something that's really questionable, we can even set it next to the shed or something for a little bit, see what happens, I mean, we could kind of do something like that to kind of help both sides till things start going over a few seasons and people get comfortable with each other, so.
And over time, we'll find out how much of an issue this actually
There
is.
you go. It might just even itself right out.
Yeah, right, we have a backlog right now, so it's hard to
Yeah.
tell how much of a problem this is gonna be.
But Chris, you did clean up quite a bit, and whether or not we just, maybe our start date should be April. We're about to go in, it's about to snow. I don't think it's in awful shape over there, so maybe we just start April, gives us plenty of time to get all this lined up, get notifications out, and begin
Okay.
a process.
Right, because some of the things you grab are actually rooted into the ground where,
The bottoms out.
yeah, so.
All right, so we'll start this in April. We'll have conversations beforehand to set it all up, all right? So that leads to another maintenance issue, which is gravel driveways. Hugh has pointed out that he does not want to use pesticides, and I certainly support that. And that means that the gravel driveways will sometimes have little bits of green growing through them. And we just wanted to run it by the commission, make sure everyone's comfortable with that. I'm comfortable with it, Chris is comfortable with it.
Not using pesticides?
But just so that in case someone ever approaches you and says, what's going on with the gravel driveways, we all can explain. I just wanted to make sure that we had formal approval for this new system. You've been using it for about a year or so now, right?
Yeah, we kind of letting it just mow. It is a little bit aggressive on our blades. It does really, raise havoc, but the other option is better than, destroying the environment with pesticides and, so if we can maintain that and gravel tracks down through there, it looks pretty nice if that's what everybody wants to do. There's areas where the old edging is poking out. Those can be part of this cleanup and pull them out and, I think we could definitely, keep it maintained, but we're still defining where the roads are, that we're not gonna let things overgrow at that point, so. I think.
Any way to treat it with anything else like vinegar?
Yeah, I know that
If
there
it
was.
starts to get too bad?
Yeah, I know there was complaints with the odor, so maybe, I don't know. There was other options, more environmental sound.
Well, vinegar is not that
vinegar
bad.
And burning them and
Clorox might,
York breaking
bleach is different, but,
chilling it. We could, there's
Yeah.
some other mechanical means, but.
I think, I like the idea of it being a kind of a softening green that kind of runs down the center of that gravel. I think it makes sense in our cemetery. I think it's appropriate. So I just want that everyone to be comfortable with that and that for Hugh to know that he's got support from us to do it this way. And if it gets too long, you'll figure out some way to.
We could pick a couple of spots and try a few different alternatives, we don't have to, obligate ourselves to doing the whole cemetery one way. We could take a section, try some vinegar, try some tilling, maybe a few spots this year and next year. And
yeah. Well, I don't have any problem with the green thought. I have no problem with it.
Yeah, I think the simplest is the best. It's less work for the highway department. And vinegar is okay, but it's still, it's
Yeah.
still.
Well, also, I'm kind of curious if it starts to get too bad, and this is for personal reasons, because I have the problem in my driveway. Like, can you then grading it? Will that?
yeah, we can go in there and soft till it, York rake it, grade it, Harley rake it.
Okay.
There's some mechanical means. And again, we can do a couple test sections, and I can get with Chris a little bit, Mike, we can, I can pull a few options together and.
The only issue with that becomes, again, the labor involved with doing it.
Right.
At the time, but yeah, that's certainly a
I think it's something,
better way to do it.
so we support you in this, and I think we'll just keep an eye on it and see how it all unfolds.
And we're not using any pesticides around the gravestones either?
Nothing,
No.
we haven't used anything, no.
Very good. Excellent. Yeah. Okay, no, that's not on the agenda.
The next thing I wanted to bring up was the tool shed. That's not the Hearst house, which is the older structure, but the somewhat more modern tool shed. Chris and Hugh would like to reclaim that space and go through it and work with Mike to figure out what's reclaimable, what should be perhaps sold or just simply disposed of. But they need our approval to go ahead and do that. So that's what I'm proposing, that we
Does that mean reclaim? You want to
reuse it in
have a
some
tax
way.
sale or is it?
The equipment in it or
Talk to Mike.
the equipment in it or the building?
Not the building, the equipment, the
Equipment,
material, I'm sorry, the
yeah.
materials. in-
So under the
To declare.
excess one is, I believe it's a total value of under 10,000 is at mine. So I can work with the two of them. If it has value, we'll put it out there for auction. If it doesn't, then then we can scrap it or dispose of it, and we'll just keep a log so that if the select board or anybody else wants to see what was disposed of, we'll have logs to do that. And if we think anything has significant value, then we'll bring it before the select board to dispose of.
And we talk about items worth $10, $100, or $1,000.
Most of it's near throwaway stuff. There is a riding lawnmower that's probably got,
You guys don't
We have the
actually
equivalent of a
have
tag
to.
sale, I mean,
I mean, most of it's,
Yeah, it's,
once again, swap shop, I mean,
It's just like any other surplus,
yeah.
town.
but I mean, an auction on $10 items, it just seems like, a lot of work for not a lot of benefit.
No, it might be just disposing some of its old mowers or other things, might be just scrapping it and getting what we can for scrap value on them.
right, a lot of it just ends up in the corner.
We'll go through it, we'll document it like is required, and then we'll dispose of it based on what we think the estimate value is. Those dictate what we have to do with it. If it's above a certain value, we have to basically put it out there. We'll take care of that. We'll take care of that. I'm sorry, that did not need to come. If you're trying to do something with the building or something, that would,
Oh, okay, well, no, I thought you'd wanted,
if it's just the interior contents, as long as it doesn't have any, either practical value or historic value, it really
right.
doesn't need to be. I mean, if we have a mower, a push mower from the 1800s in there or something, we want to pick that up and figure out what to do with it. But if it's just,
We use that around those old gravestones.
if it's a rusted 20-year-old push mower with a mower on it, we're just going to dispose of it. So.
But I know that you want to clean out that space and reuse it and reorganize it, and you just wanted to make sure that the commission is on board with that, so.
All right, yeah.
All right, good. All right. I would like to set up actually a monthly regular meeting for this commission. Just as you can see, there's things that come up we need to talk about, and there are other issues that I think will require more long-term conversations over time. So one suggestion is the fourth Tuesday of every month at 10 a.m. So I wanted to ask people how that sounds. If it doesn't work, then
Do you think we need monthly? It's up to you guys.
I'm okay with it.
No, look. I'm of the opinion that you and town employees should be empowered to do what you need to do. If you feel like we need to get together once a month, that's fine, but I mean, nothing that you want to do, did we object you to that? I mean, I think this is indicative of, the fact that, at least for me, because I got so many meetings I attend, I think it's great when people feel empowered to do, the things that you're volunteering or employed to do. But if you want to see it together monthly for now, that's totally up to you.
well, that's lovely, and thank you. And so far, that's great. I imagine there will be meetings where we won't all agree on everything. But more to the point, there are many things coming up, and some of them are large projects that we should be discussing. And also, particularly members of the select board, when people approach you, you need to know what's going on.
Yeah. definitely.
And if we're off making decisions and
I'm
having.
not saying never, I'm just saying,
Yeah, no, I think, at least for now, I think sometimes the meetings will be 20 minutes. I think sometimes they'll be an hour. I think it really varies. There's a lot of things that have not been attended to for a good 4 or 5 years. So at least for now, I'd like to set it up so that I'm not going through that, who's available on what day kind of thing, so.
Once again, I defer to you.
All right, yay.
Tuesday, 10 a.m. is fine with me.
All right.
Okay, so
Tuesday's fine.
So fourth Tuesday, that's wonderful. That's great. So we'll do that.
They'll show up in the town calendar. Now things.
There is one more thing one thing I want Chris to report on so that people know what's happening. That's the burial records. But then the other thing is, and then this might be something we defer to the next meeting, we need to review our current cemetery fees and consider raising them. And again, that might be something that we would be about to talk about in the next meeting, but I want to put that out there. Our current fees are in 2 parts. They're a little weird.
Well, we do an interment, grave opening and closing, and the perpetual care, well, not perpetual, the cemetery trust fund. We do not have a traditional perpetual care
We have a
account.
cemetery care
We have
fund, I think.
a cemetery trust fund, yes.
And where are they now?
What's the fees? So for full interments, for casket burial, we actually defer that work to a private contractor at this stage. So we don't collect an opening fee for that. That goes to a private contractor.
So the family pays a private contractor?
Yes.
And what does that cost
And
typically?
that's, I believe, 700,
750.
750 to open the grave. There's an extra charge for Saturday afternoon and Sunday. There's an extra fee that goes on that as well. So for each of those burials, we collect $300 that goes into our trust fund. Burial of cremated remains is $300 for the opening and closing of the grave, and $300 also for the trust fund.
How many of these transactions a year are there?
Up to upwards of 20 around that, give or take.
So we're talking about
20 a year.
20 a year, somewhere between 300 and 750. So that's basically around $11,000.
Here's the other piece, though.
But again, that 750 does not come to the town. That goes to the.
I understand, and I'm just wondering why we charge anything at all. I would suggest that for $11,000, it should become part of the general budget, and that
Well,
when
actually,
someone
but-
dies.
Hold on a second. There's something else. When we collect the fees, only half of them go back into the cemetery care fund. The other half goes into general.
That's why there's two charges. One covers the interment, the other is the donation to the trust fund. And we do not sell the plots either. Plots are given, that's part of our bylaws, there's a section in there. Plots are assigned at the time of need. So we, if you've lived in town forever and you've paid your taxes, you get a cemetery plot. So the trust fund charge is the fee that we collect in lieu of selling plots.
Oh.
That's the way that's always been done.
Right, and there is nothing to say that at some point in time, instead of using outside contractors, that we might resume doing the openings, right?
Although I will say that it is right now working very well. And a good case in point was last Wednesday morning, we had an 8:45 graveside burial in the morning. The grave was being opened that morning by the private contractor. At the same time, our guys were up clearing out the catch basins on Main Street in anticipation of the hurricane that was coming. If we were doing that burial in-house, we wouldn't have cleared the catch basins in town prior to this hurricane. So there's a good example of why this is beneficial to us.
At least at the current
At
time,
least at the current time.
based on the staffing that we have, and,
With the staff and equipment, I gotta agree with that. I mean, because, what we're getting, I can't put two guys, a machine and truck in there for that, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's more than that, so.
But the management of vendors is separate than the transaction fees to
Right.
those who've lost someone.
I
And so
think we need to look at those transaction fees, not the.
here's my concern is, for many people in town, $750 to open and close the grave to a vendor and $300 to the professional care fund is a trivial amount of money, but that is not true for everybody in town. And I would just suggest that, there's already, tremendous costs associated when someone dies. I mean, it can easily be $5,000-$10,000 by the time you have the event or whatever it is, the wake and all the rest of it. And I just wonder if this is another example where, for 20 transactions a year, we're kind of making a one size fits all where people's means are not always the same, I guess. I'm not saying that we should change it. I'm just bringing it up.
I would be careful about, as far as bringing the outside vendor, that should not be a cost. That's a cost incurred for them.
Well, it's a cost incurred whether those guys do it or whether it's an outside vendor. I mean, obviously we pay the guys. I mean.
No, it's not a cost incurred to us if it's right now that the families pay for the outside vendor.
I understand how it works
Okay,
now.
yeah.
What I'm suggesting is, is
Yeah.
it,
You're suggesting that we not charge anything at all?
well, no, I think that there's two questions here. One is the cost of actually burying someone. And then the second legitimate question, I think, is is it a donation? Is it a suggested donation or is it a fee? The cemetery, the trust fund issue. I mean, obviously funding that in the long term needs to happen. And I would suggest that we eliminate that. I mean, obviously the town could, make a payment and as part of a budget for everyone that we bury into the cemetery trust fund. But, the fact of the matter is I think that we should deal with those two as separate items, you know?
I'm sorry, which two?
The cost of the interment fee and the cemetery trust fund fee.
Right, I actually would like, was not suggesting we talk about the interment fee
Oh,
because
okay.
it's not our cost, literally, it's right, I mean, it's.
That's right.
The family pays someone else.
With the exception of a cremation burial,
Cremation, yeah.
which we will do in-house.
So it's the other fees that I want to talk about and also where they go. Because right now they're being split between the cemetery care fund and the general fund. So the cemetery care fund is not even getting the whole amount that we're collecting.
Why don't we continue this to our
I think we should. But I just want to lay all that out so that everybody understands that's what we really, and I have done some research on what other towns are charging. And so,
What are they?
well, it varies quite a bit.
Before we continue.
What was that? You know, West Stockbridge, 500, another 300.
For the trust fund or for the,
Well, it's a combination. It's a plot fee, which we don't have,
okay.
and perpetual care.
So they
And
might have an interment fee, which might be separate.
Right.
Gravestone,
a lot of these fees
Cost,
are separate, yeah.
yeah.
Opening, closing, Lennox, free guarantee. So, I mean, I've had this information and get this information to everybody. It'd be easier than just trying to say it because there's no one fee. But we're not charging very much. And we haven't tapped the cemetery care fund in a long time, which is why it's so healthy right now. But we are going to be tapping it
I agree.
going forward. So I think this is something that we really need to talk about and think about. And I agree we should do it next time. So then the last thing is, just wanted to have Chris give a kind of a brief report on where we are with cemetery burial records, because we have a little bit of an issue.
Yeah, it's a little bit of an issue, but not a disaster by any means. I want to make that clear. There's probably 80, I came up with 83 burials that have occurred in the past 5 years, which have not been recorded in the plot cards. But that is something that I've been plugging away at and working on. I was able to get the turnover reports from the treasurer, which there indicated, various checks from funeral homes or individuals. And by that, I was able to compile a list and then sort of correlate that to, burial permits and death certificates that we have on record. That coupled with even doing some research with online obituaries and whatnot to get proper dates and information. And then quite a bit of field work going out into the cemetery and locating stuff. I'm piecing things together. And I've just randomly spending an hour here and there, I've knocked off about 20 of those off the list of 83. So more work to do. There may be, as I get towards the end of the list, there may be a few mysteries that I have to dig a little deeper to take care of, but not a disaster by any means. It's manageable. It will be managed. We'll get there. But forward, things need to be recorded in a timely manner as they come up, because if the longer things get let go, the less of a chance you have to recover that information. And that becomes critical down the road for future burials. We need to have accurate records as to where everybody is located within individual plots. So we're working towards that.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you guys know because it was an issue and we're working on it, so. So then our next meeting will be September 28th at 10 o'clock.
Sounds good.
About.
Well, before you adjourn, I have a question. I wonder if I could ask it.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, this is Kate Fletcher. Roxanne, are you
Yeah.
still? Oh, good. Would it be possible the Cemetery Commission is not listed under boards and committees on the website. And I know it's listed under facilities, but I'm not sure that's the most intuitive place for it to be listed for somebody who's, looking for information or contact information. Would it be possible to list it under boards and committees under the town website?
I don't see why not.
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be good.
Agendas and everything.
You have different colors.
The agenda is everything, it's listed under.
I know it's on agendas, but it isn't on the other page.
Yeah, it's actually not, you have to go searching for it. It's under.
DPW even, I believe.
Yeah, it is. It's under.
We
it's
can
under-
leave it there and pull it over to the board and commission.
I think you should have both
If
in
you're
there.
looking for
Yeah.
agendas, it's there, but
Yeah.
if
What's
people
that?
are just looking for content.
Thanks, Kate. That's a good
Cemetery,
suggestion.
where it's listed on the website.
Oh,
Yeah,
Is there
we'll work
anything?
on putting in both.
Yeah, I think both would be perfect, because under DPW, it actually has Chris's contact information, so if you have questions, you can ask him, so that's
Yeah, I
perfect.
mean, it's good for contact information, because that's what people are generally looking for.
Anything else before we adjourn?
Just maybe going back to the tool shed quickly. You know,
I was gonna bring that up, but I didn't know if I should.
we talked about cleaning it out, but I know we're coming into fall and then town meeting coming up and whatnot. The building, aside from restoration, any potential restoration of the Hearst house and the vault, the tool shed as a functional building needs some work. I know one garage door was replaced a couple of years ago. The other one is in rough shape. I know there's possibly some rotten sills on the building.
Damaged.
There's some damaged stuff, some windows, doors, things like that. There's a punch list of maintenance needs that building needs, and I just didn't know if maybe we should work on compiling that list and maybe even getting some prices.
Didn't we
Just so
get
we know.
Didn't we get a quote?
We had a quote for the Hearst house. That was for the older tool shed, which was the original Hearst house.
That was the one from
There was-
H?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly, yes.
Okay.
Yep. But this is the actual functional
Yeah.
maintenance building. And I'd even go so far, I know you brought it up, we have no power. The building's all wired, but there's no power in the building. I'd like to even look at,
Well, let's,
Power in there.
why don't we plan on the three of us getting together and then bringing something to this committee?
Sounds good.
And then we probably have to run it past, I assume might be old enough to fall under historic, depending on how much square footage we're gonna be messing with.
The new one or the old one?
well, the old one might even be old enough now, the
The
1960s.
new one might be old enough now.
Yeah.
That's only if you're altering the exterior, though. If you're just doing maintenance on what's there, it's not anything that needs to come before the commission.
And with that, we should keep the first house and the vault on the radar for the,
Yeah, the vault needs work, yeah, that's another
Yeah.
conversation, yeah.
whether we fund them, we probably should fund them separately, the functional tool house.
Oh, yes.
And the historic
Yes.
structures,
Yeah.
keep them as separate
Keep them
projects,
separate,
but they
yeah.
should both remain on the radar.
Yeah, good, I'm glad you brought that up,
Right.
yeah. So you three will get together and just come back.
Bring back to you guys.
Okay, sounds good.
Can we get a spare set of keys to the vault?
We don't have to.
Have you seen the key?
And he's the only one who can actually
Yeah,
work
we're gonna
it.
get it back there.
Yeah, I mean, even if you have it, you can't use it.
Can't bring in a car hardware. I hear that they make lots of different ones.
All right, great, so we'll call this meeting adjourned. Thank you all very much, I really appreciate it.
Thank you.